The 3:30 p.m. meeting of the Bakersfield City Council is now in session.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to call to order the 3:30 regular City Council meeting of April 12th, 2023. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Arias.
Here.
Councilmember Weir. Councilmember Smith.
I am here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Gray. And Councilmember Kaur.
Here. Thank you. In keeping with the Council's resolution, the public statements portion is now divided into two periods. There's a period for items listed on the meeting agenda and items not on the meeting agenda. Statements for items listed on this afternoon's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total per agenda item. Statements regarding items not listed on the agenda are also given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, give them to the clerk, who will give copies to the Council. If you're here to make a public statement, please fill out a public speaker card and give your completed card to the city clerk. We ask that you mark whether you're here to speak on an item listed on this afternoon's agenda or in a matter not on the agenda. Speakers who do not identify a specific agenda item will be presumed to be speakers for the non-agenda portion. Those speakers will be called during the non-agenda portion of the meeting. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers regarding items listed on this afternoon's agenda?
Mayor Go, we have not received any speaker cards for items listed on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers regarding items not listed on the agenda?
Mayor Go, we also have not received any speaker cards for items not listed on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Closed session, item 4A, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. Item 1, North Kern Water Storage District versus City of Bakersfield. Item 2, in the matter of Kern River applications of North Kern Water Storage District and City of Shafter et al. 3, bring back the Kern Water Audit, California et al. Versus City of Bakersfield et al. We've received a staff memorandum on this item, pulling this item from tonight's agenda. Closed session item 4B, conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation. And closed session item 4C, conference with labor negotiator.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Move to adjourn to closed session.
Thank you. We're adjourned to closed session. Reconvening the 3:30 City Council meeting. Madam City Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor. On items 4A, 1, 2, and 3, those matters were pulled by the city attorney. On item 4B as in boy, by unanimous direction, the city attorney was given direction. And on item 4C, by unanimous direction, the labor team was given direction. And there was one council member absent on both of those votes, and that was Councilmember Gray. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we stand adjourned at 5:02. And we'll start the next meeting shortly.
Welcome to the Bakersfield City Council meeting. This television broadcast is brought to you by the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m., Sunday at 10 a.m., and the following Wednesday at 7 p.m. You can download the agenda for this meeting at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over this evening's meeting, the Honorable Mayor Karen K. Go.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to call to order the 5:15 regular City Council meeting of April 12th, 2023. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Arias.
Here.
Councilmember Weir.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
I'm here.
Councilmember Freeman. Here. Councilmember Gray. And Councilmember Kaur.
Here. Thank you. Welcome to all of you. At this time, Pastor Mike Sutherland, who's pastor of Mill Creek Christian Church, will offer the invocation. Pastor Mike, congratulations on being the Downtown Business Association's 2023 block captain, receiving the award. So thank you for your service there. And it's always a pleasure to see Mill Creek out there serving others. I know you spend a lot of time serving our homeless brothers and sisters, so thank you so much for that. Following the invocation, Miguel Estrada, who's a junior at Frontier High School, he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Miguel won the California Interscholastic Federation Wrestling Championship in February at Mechanics Bank right here in the 145-pound division. He is the first area wrestler to win back-to-back championships since 2017. So we're just so proud of you. And at this point, Pastor Mike, if you would come, please stand, everyone.
So I know it is something that we usually do to close our eyes, bow our heads, but some of you know that I like us to keep our eyes open while we're praying. I'd like us to be looking at each other and kind of through each other as I say these words. And so if you would, let's be looking at each other as I lift these words to God. Creator God, we give you praise and thanks for this city of Bakersfield that we call home. In our hearts, it still seems like a small town, and yet we know that we live in a big city with big city challenges. We ask you, God, to give us insight and wisdom to turn those challenges into opportunities, and those opportunities into action and solutions for all our children, all your children. You have blessed us with this staff, with these elected officials, and with the many interested citizens. Now inspire us to use our ears and our mouth in the same proportion that you gave them to us, that we might listen twice as much as we talk, and in doing so, learn from each other and develop policies that benefit all. We trust your guidance, great God. Amen.
Amen. Miguel?
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Miguel, just stay there. Miguel, we're so proud of you. The first back-to-back champion for California. So it's my honor to present you with the Mayor's Medal. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Presentations item 4A, proclamation to Jessica Banuelos, Donation Development Coordinator of One Legacy, declaring DMV Donate Life Month in Bakersfield during April 2023.
One Legacy Foundation, thank you so much for your service to our community and for your ongoing efforts to promote this very important donation. It's my honor to read this proclamation. Whereas organ, tissue, marrow, and blood donation are life-giving acts recognized worldwide as expressions of compassion to those in need, and whereas more than 100,000 individuals nationwide and more than 20,000 in California are currently on the National Organ Transplant waiting list. And whereas a single individual's donation of the heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, pancreas, and small intestine can save up to 8 lives, and donation of tissue can save and heal the lives of more than 75 others. And whereas a single blood donation can help 3 people in need of blood, and the decision to donate is not restricted by age or medical condition. And whereas millions of Californians have signed up with the state-authorized Donate Life California Donate Registry to ensure their wishes to be organ, eye, and tissue donors are honored. And whereas California residents can sign up with the Donate Life California Donor Registry when applying for or renewing their driver's license or ID cards at the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Now, therefore, I, Karen Go, Mayor of the City of Bakersfield, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as DMV Donate Life Month in our city and encourage all Bakersfield residents to check yes when applying for or renewing their driver's license or ID card, or by signing up at www.donatelifecalifornia.org or www.donevitacalifornia.org. It's my pleasure to be able to present this to you, Jessica, and thank you so much for your leadership. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Go, and thank you to the members of City Council. It is my honor to serve my hometown. I'm born and raised here in Kern County. In 2022, we were able to save 76 lives in Kern County, heal more than 4,000 lives through the gift of tissue donation, and restore sight in more than 50 individuals. That's just 2022. In 2023, we are on track to double the amount of lives saved, with so far year to date 43 lives saved in 2023. There are countless lives being healed through tissue donation, countless lives being restored back with their eyesight. Lori Malcolm from JJ's Legacy always says it best. It's another pair of sunrises and sunsets that someone previously could not see before. So we truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for recognizing the importance of Donate Life. Please register to be an organ donor if you wish to do so. Share your wishes with your family. And again, it is an honor to serve Kern County. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Presentation item 4B, presentation to Kim Berrigan, Purchasing Officer for the Finance Department of the City of Bakersfield for 46 years of resolute service.
The year was 1977. A little film called Star Wars opened in theaters. The first Apple II computers went on sale. Jumpsuits were all the rage. Atari 2600 was released for video gaming at home. And Kim Berrigan was officially hired by the City of Bakersfield as Clerk Typist 1. Since then, she has gone on to hold other positions in our organization, with the most recent being our Purchasing Officer. Now here we are, 46 years later, and Kim has become our longest serving city employee ever, ever, ever. She's been described by her coworkers as a good judge of character, accurate and thorough, with a helpful attitude. Not one to bend the rules, Kim always has played by the books. She's strived to remain compliant with municipal codes, administrative policies, and procedures, and has set an excellent example of how all employees should adhere to their departmental policies. Kim has represented the city with integrity, with professionalism, and we're so thankful for her dedicated service, her decades of dedicated service, and her commitment. Kim, we are just so honored to be able to celebrate you, and so I would like to present this certificate of recognition in honor of 46 years of dedicated service to the city of Bakersfield, in recognition of your stewardship of taxpayer funds and resolute commitments to the financial well-being of the city and its citizens, in recognition of your outstanding leadership and community engagement, and in recognition of your support of the wellness and improvement of our city. Congratulations, Kim. Best wishes on your retirement. And I think 46 years deserves a little bit more. She holds the record for the most years.
Thank you, Mayor Go and Council.
Not brave enough. Well, thank you everyone for taking this moment that's well deserved for Kim here. Normally Randy would do this presentation, but he was unavailable, so it is my honor and my pleasure to present this to you as both a fellow colleague and a friend. To put this in perspective, I think me and the mayor had kind of the same agenda or mindset here. Kim started in 1997. Her employee ID number is 14. To put that into perspective, our newest city employee's employee ID number is 8,567. In honor of Randy and his spirit for not being here tonight, I will keep a tradition that he likes to do called What Happened in the Year in Which You Were Hired. So, as Mayor mentioned, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope came out. Close Encounters of a Third Kind and Smokey and the Bandit were all top in the theater. Dungeons & Dragons, the basic set card game, was released, and thanks to the Netflix series Stranger Things, we all now know what Dungeons & Dragons is, because I certainly didn't. To put in perspective, the value of $1 back in 1997 for under $380 a person, you could take a 8-day, 7-night stay, including airfare from Philadelphia to Florida, to stay at the Walt Disney World Resort. The big scandals of the year, we have the Big Ear radio telescope, which we consider or think heard the first radio transmission from an outer space deemed to be an intellectual extraterrestrial source. It took a worldwide pandemic for the government to admit that maybe UFOs do exist. Saturday Night Live Fever soundtrack did not get an Academy Award nomination, upsetting all of the Saturday Night Live Fever fans. In U.S. politics, we had the inauguration of Jimmy Carter. Pop culture, Slim Fast became the fastest selling weight loss gimmick on the market. Chia Pet also made its debut into the market. And the cost of a Super Bowl ad was $125,000. Christmas gifts for the year, as Mayor pointed out, Atari was one of the #1 items, along with any Star Wars toys. The Chia Pet, of course, made a statement that year. Slime, which has become popular again, and skateboards. Some of our most watched TV shows were Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, Three's Company, 60 Minutes, Charlie's Angels, All in the Family, Little House on the Prairie, Alice, MASH, and One Day at a Time. It was an excellent year for music. We had Two Nights the Night by Rod Stewart, Car Wash by Rolls Royce, New Kid in Town by the Eagles, Hotel California by the Eagles, Dancing Queen by ABBA, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, and Best of My Love by The Emotions. The New York Yankees won the World Series, the Oakland Raiders won the Super Bowl, and the Portland Trail Blazers were the NBA champions. Now, I bring all of this up not to say that Kim is old, though I wasn't even born when you started working here, but all jokes aside. I bring this all up to say that we have been blessed with 46 years of wonderful service and friendship. Kim calls herself the historian, and there is a reason for that. She has fabulous little things like this lying around. And for those who don't know what this is a card with measurements on it that you could draw onto a paper to scale furniture so that you knew what needed to be purchased for your office space. But there's another reason. It is mine. She's passed it on. I carry it with pride. But the reason we call her a historian is because you don't serve for 46 years without obtaining a plethora of information. And whenever we don't know the how, the who, or the why of something in the city, we know that we can turn to Kim, and most likely she will have an answer for that. Because of this, her absence is most definitely going to be felt by many of us, especially when we have potlucks. Because if you've never had cookies or cake by Kim, you are definitely missing out. But it is with my sincere respect to you to congratulate you on your retirement and the fact that you will never again have to ask for time off to take a trip to Hawaii. Thank you.
Let's see whether anyone can beat that record, 46 years. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Presentation item 4C, proclamation to David Madding of the Open Door Network declaring Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Bakersfield during April 2023.
Welcome, David. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have survived some form of sexual assault in their lifetime. This could be your neighbor, coworker, or friend. These numbers are alarming. They're unacceptable. Thank you so much, Open Door Network, for your service to our community and for your continued efforts to advocate for survivors. It's my honor now to issue this proclamation. Whereas the President of the United States has designated April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and whereas the Open Door Network has dedicated the month of April to raising awareness of sexual assault in Bakersfield and the other communities in Kern County and providing the highest quality of service to the survivors of this heinous crime. And whereas the city of Bakersfield applauds the tireless efforts of all who care for survivors of sexual assault, and whereas the city of Bakersfield unequivocally condemns those who commit sexual assault and affirms that those who do shall find no rest in our city. Now, therefore, I, Karen Go, Mayor of the City of Bakersfield, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in our city and call upon all citizens to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies and observances in which the residents of Bakersfield and Kern County may join to uplift the survivors and create a community free from sexual assault. And it's dated this day, the 12th of April. David, thank you so much for your efforts, and I know you're speaking on behalf of Director Lauren Skidmore. Offer some words.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for this. I really appreciate it. As the mayor said, unfortunately, Lauren was unable to make it tonight, so unfortunately, you get me. But I do want to thank every one of you for this proclamation. I want to thank all of our community partners that make it possible to serve these survivors of sexual assault, particularly the District Attorney and the Family Justice Center, but also the ladies you see right here who are part of the SART team who serve these survivors every day and serve them with compassion and with dignity. We also want to thank the Bakersfield Police Department and the Kern County Sheriff's Office for the work that they do. And lastly, at the Open Door Network, we're very appreciative for the support from the city, because without your support, we would not be able to do any of the work that we do. So thank you.
Here are a few guidelines to help our meeting run smoothly. We request that you turn off your phones. Please be courteous in the use of cameras and videos. For safety reasons and as a courtesy to others, no signs are allowed in the council chambers or in the lobby. Applause is allowed during the presentations portion of the meeting, but not during other portions of the meeting. Everyone in attendance is expected to adhere to the rules of decorum established by resolution of the City Council. Failure to abide by the city's rules of decorum, including any disruptive behavior that interferes with our ability to have an orderly and efficient meeting, prevents the City Council from conducting the business of the city. Consider this a first warning to everyone in attendance that conduct that disrupts this meeting may result in expulsion and/or the chambers being cleared. Behavior that disrupts the meeting includes repetitive statements, going off topic, shouting, outbursts from the audience, and surpassing the 2-minute time limit. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public statements.
Thank you. In keeping with the Council's resolution, the public statements portion is now divided into 2 periods. There's a period for items listed on the meeting agenda and items not on the meeting agenda. Statements for items listed on tonight's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total per agenda item. The consent calendar as a whole constitutes 1 agenda item. Statements regarding items not listed on the agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, please give them to the clerk, who will give copies to the council. If you're here to make a public statement, please fill out a public speaker card and give your completed card to the city clerk. We ask that you mark whether you're here to speak on an item listed on tonight's agenda or in a matter not on the agenda. Speakers who do not identify a specific agenda item will be presumed speakers for the non-agenda portion. Those speakers will be called during the non-agenda portion of the meeting. We're very interested and concerned with your issues. However, due to the public notice requirement of the Brown Act, the council cannot take action when an item isn't on the agenda. The council can, however, refer your matter to committee or request that staff contact you. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers regarding items listed on tonight's agenda?
Mayor Go, we have received 7 speaker cards for items, consent calendar item 7R. First public speaker is Sandra Plasencia.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sandra Plasencia. I am the policy advocate for Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. We are here in alliance with Greenfield Walking Group. Transportation plays a very important role in our everyday lives, being vital in helping us accomplish our daily tasks. As the city moves forward with the active transportation plan, we want to highlight community concerns and outreach strategies that can make this plan reflective of community priorities and needs. Residents have stressed the importance of traffic safety throughout the city. Knowing that a child has lost their life earlier this year in front of Bakersfield High, we urge the city to focus on a high-intensity activated crosswalk system and traffic safety in the area of the city to make sure students are safe while walking to and waiting for the school bus. Additionally, we urge complete sidewalks and safety measures around Golden Valley as kids walking home have to walk along on the dirt path, and during rainy seasons, they may have to walk on Hoskins on the road. Residents have also asked for a four-way stop on Hayden Hill Street and Berkshire Road to promote pedestrian safety, car speed, and have swerved onto properties. One resident even put up a giant tree as a mitigation to make sure her children are safe inside of their home. This highlights the need for traffic calming measures to ensure pedestrian safety and promote active transportation in the community. Apart from traffic safety, to foster active transportation, infrastructure improvements throughout the east side and southeast of Bakersfield are a huge concern for many residents. The current rains have exacerbated the amount of potholes and cracks we see on the roads, which expose the lack of infrastructure in the east and southeast side of Bakersfield. We urge ATP to focus on east and southeast Bakersfield infrastructure needs and prioritize those areas to make it safer for bike and pedestrian usage. Residents urge the need for safer and accessible transportation, including bikes, e-bikes, more bus routes, urban greening, streetlights to facilitate active transportation. We understand the scope of work includes community outreach, and we urge the city to include door-to-door outreach, pop-up events, educational workshops on the active transportation plan in various neighborhoods across the city. We also encourage
Ms.
the city...
Placencia, your time is up. Can you bring your comments to a close, please?
Yeah, we encourage the city to partner with CBOs and to spread awareness about the transportation plan. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Placencia, for your comments today. I appreciate it. Mr. Strecklus, if we can send a copy of our traffic calming toolkit, newly minted traffic calming toolkit to Ms. Placencia, that would be excellent. And also, if we can work with her CBO to identify other CBOs and other partners to include in the development of our ATP plan, I think that'll be a great step moving forward. And then finally, just want to lift up that we actually have a multimodal transportation and traffic safety committee, ad hoc committee, that you're welcome to participate in. In fact, we welcome lots of participation so that we can receive community feedback, where that committee is doing a tremendous amount of work trying to design complete streets throughout the city of Bakersfield. So thank you for being here tonight and lifting those concerns.
Councilmember Kaur.
Hi, how are you? I want to thank Greenfield Walking Group as well as Leadership Council for uplifting this. It's vitally important. I think a number of us have highlighted how much community safety in the terms of keeping multimodal safety a top priority for us is something I myself have been talking about endlessly, but I want to emphasize the areas you've mentioned, especially those around Golden Valley High School, Hosking, all of those areas, Berkshire, and want to also share that recently I have also made a referral to make sure that we start thinking about safe routes to schools, and that's a conversation I'd love for you all to join, and I will reach out, and I see you all in the back. I'm glad to see friends here to be involved in that conversation, because you are absolutely right. Having those safe routes to schools, as well as understanding traffic patterns as the community see them in terms of danger, are a different perspective that brings new light for us. So thank you for uplifting that as well, and I'll be personally reaching out as well to make sure we stay in conversation about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Kaur. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Daisy Vega, followed by Natalie Tarango, followed by Raquel Robledo.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you. Hello, my name is Daisy Vega, member of Greenfield Walking Group, and I'm here to talk about that I'm concerned about the crosswalk by Golden Valley High School. It really concerns me because a lot of students cross by there, and not only that, it's also there's a program, this L. Jack Sheets Career Center. That's a program for kids with disabilities, and they also cross by there, and it's really dangerous. There's no sign there, and there's not a crosswalk, and people can get ran over. And sometimes mothers with their children, high schoolers, and people can get ran over. It really concerns me, and it concerns all of us, my whole crew. And we hope we can get a crosswalk soon, as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Vega. Next speaker is Natalie Tarango.
Hi, good evening. I am a student at Golden Valley High School. My name is Natalie Tarango. I also serve on the Youth Commission for Ward 1. My concern today is that in front of Golden Valley, there is a dirt area that has no sidewalk, and a lot of students, my personal own friends, walk through there, and they have to get their shoes dirty. They have to be super careful for passing cars because it's very dangerous when turning from Hosking onto Monitor Street. Some cars get into that area and turn where people are crossing, and so it's very dangerous, and a sidewalk would be very helpful to prevent any accidents from happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Raquel Robledo, followed by Alondra Villanueva, followed by Nicholas Esquivel, followed by Gemma Perez.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Raquel Robledo, and I'm from the Greenfield Walking Group. I wanted to bring this awareness to the crosswalk in California and South Beach, as it is unsafe for people to be able to utilize. With Bakersfield High School being nearby, students may feel unsafe with the unnoticeable cars coming by and the cars not being able to see the students. We would like to advocate for a red flashing stop sign to be added in this area to make drivers more aware of when to stop and to allow people to feel safer when walking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robledo. Next speaker, please. Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. I had a chance to meet with Greenfield Walking Group regarding California Avenue and 8th Street. I believe I've made a referral to Public Works regarding this intersection. There is some good news, though. We are working on a complete streets project on 8th Street from Highway 58 all the way into Truxton Avenue. So it'll include that intersection. And so we should all get together again and have a conversation about how we might design this intersection in the future, because I agree with you. This is a problem intersection, particularly given the number of students from BHS who use these intersections and this particular intersection every single day, every single school day, both in the morning and the evening. And I've seen dozens of kids walking in the street because that sidewalk is so narrow. And so we ought to do something with that, and I agree with you. Thank you for speaking up.
Ms. Villanueva.
Hi, my name is Alondra Villanueva. Good afternoon. I wanted to speak about the crosswalk in front of Paula Elementary School and by Stern Park. There is no particular stop sign to stop on the main road, and as an elementary school, many little kids cross the street, and when there is no crosswalking person, it is dangerous. As my own experience, I had to wait a couple of minutes with me and my friends before we ran across the street, making sure that no car would hit us. And it is just implementing a stop sign or something like that would be of use and make it safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is Ms. Esquivel, or Nicholas Esquivel, Mr. Esquivel.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Esquivel. I will be talking about the situation at Hosking and Union. There's no sidewalk for that area, and I just want to tell you that in my own experience, I've seen people fall because it's extremely unsafe, and I just want to see if you guys could support us with making it safer for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Ms. Perez. Gemma?
Buenas
Bienvenidas.
tardes. Mi nombre es Gemma Pérez. Soy de Greenfield Walking Group.
Good evening. My name is Gemma Perez. I'm with the Greenfield Walking Group.
Se supone que yo iba a hablar primero para presentar a los jóvenes.
She thought she was going to be able to present first to introduce the youth.
porque para algunos de ellos son nuevos y es primera vez que tienen esta experiencia y se sienten nerviosos.
Some of the youth are new to the Greenfield Walking Group and coming to City Council, so they are a little nervous this evening, and that's why she wanted to introduce them and do that warm handoff.
Pero ellos son más valientes que yo. Creo que estoy más nerviosa yo que ellos, están haciendo muy bien.
They are much more courageous than I. They are doing an excellent job.
Ellos son los expertos, ellos saben lo que está pasando en su comunidad.
They are the experts in the community and know what happens in the community.
Gracias por recibirnos, gracias Cristian por habernos recibido hace algunos días en tu oficina, gracias a todos ustedes porque siempre están pendientes lo que pasa con las personas y su comunidad.
Thank you for welcoming us this evening. Thank you to City Manager for allowing us to come and visit at your office just a few days ago, and thank you to Madam Mayor and the full City Council for allowing us to present and speak tonight.
Thank you so much, Hema. It is such an honor to have you in our community. You are the model leader for neighborhoods and students. Thank you so much for presenting tonight. You are so blessed to have Hema at the helm and just keep following her example and keep serving. So thank you very much. Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. I was just sitting back and listening to the comments, and what I realized is that I, as the council member of Southeast Bakersfield, am lucky to have each one of you to be advocates for our community. It is because of your support that we are able to lift up so many of these different issues throughout our community, and we know that the need is great. And so what you're doing tonight is a first step in the right direction, but we've got to continue to push at every possible opportunity. And so with that, I actually want to make a referral tonight through the Ad hoc Transportation Committee that we actually have a conversation about utilizing some of the funding that we've set aside for safe routes to schools. And I would like for us to have a conversation not only about these projects, but many of the other projects that I know folks and advocates like Sandra have lifted up, so that we can best utilize that funding to protect our students as they're getting to and from school. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Arias. Councilmember Kaur.
I wanted to directly talk to the youth that are here today. It is so important for us to hear from you, for the community to hear from you, and I know it takes a lot of courage to speak at the mic, but I want you all to know that you were fabulous, you were courageous, you were brave, you were articulate. You know exactly what your community needs, and that's what we need to hear, and that's what we also see, but it takes your voice, it takes your vision to really push it through, and for you all to take time out to come and to spend time with Greenfield Walking Group to do all of the work you do locally in your community. That is truly community power, that's youth power, and like the mayor said, we're so lucky to have Greenfield Walking Group, which is just a pivotal example of what community advocacy and engagement really looks like in our city. You all make us better, and you do so many different things that really enrich our community. You make it greener, you make it safer, you make it friendlier, you activate it, you have dancing classes that bring our parks to life. So I just wanted to commend you all for coming today to speak, and we hear you, and we're gonna keep working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. As I listen to all of you, in most cases, the lack of safety has been caused by the school being in an area that isn't completely developed yet. We usually build our schools in anticipation, so there's farmland around, undeveloped commercial properties, but it's usually out a little bit from where all the streets and curbs and gutters are. And many of those lands don't develop for decades after the school is there. So the one side of the street doesn't have a sidewalk, and you have all these problems, and every one of them that you described comes from that situation. And I'm wondering, in a sense, it's partly the school's responsibility. They put it out there and kind of create this problem. But I'm wondering if, maybe Mr. Tracklos, you can tell me, is there any way we can have a policy or something where when a school goes in and they sort of independently work with the developer, we're a little bit out of the loop. Can we have any policies or anything that require some sort of a safe walking plan be put together where you identify what's around the school, how far it is from a real sidewalk, or the crosswalks that are going to be needed, which might be our responsibility, but even if the walking paths that might be on unimproved property, maybe they're asphalt paths because they have to be removed later, but that we could deal with this because development may not come for a decade. And I drive by, I think it's Independence all the time. It's all dirt on one side of the street. I know the kids should walk on the side, but you know, people are going to be walking and parking over there in the dirt. If we could please contact the school districts and say, is there a way we can work together to have a policy that when we put in a new school, we identify where kids will be walking, where we need to put sidewalks or flashing signs or stops, part city responsibility, part of it is school districts. Maybe they have to help us in funding. Maybe we have to facilitate working with landowner across the street for easements, but that we put together a policy if we have the authority to do that. But I'd just like you to look into that because we could prevent these problems by addressing this when the school was built, and then we wouldn't have these unsafe conditions for decades to come. So if you could look into that,
Yes,
get
sir,
back to
Councilman
us
Freeman.
later.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Thank you to all of you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Non-agenda item public statements. We have received 4 public speaker cards regarding items not listed on tonight's agenda. The first public speaker is Ryan Nance, followed by Josh Taylor, followed by Andy Ceballos, followed by William Bailey.
Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Ryan Nance. I'm a carpenter by trade, and I'd like to share with you some info about tax fraud during tax season. When we talk about tax fraud, some people think it's about cheating on your taxes, and it is, but it's much more sinister than that. Construction industry tax fraud is wage theft, it's workers' compensation fraud, it's labor trafficking. Criminal exploitation of workers by developers and contractors is part of a business model that requires a vulnerable workforce that has no practical option other than to accept that opportunity. When workers are vulnerable, they get preyed upon. But what can we do about it? This April 12th through the 18th, Local 743 and the United Brotherhood of Carpenters are taking part in the National Tax Fraud Days of Action, a week-long series of events to raise awareness about construction industry tax fraud. Behind me is another speaker, Josh Taylor, who will share with you about what you can do as leaders to stop the exploitation of workers, stop the criminal contracting practices, and stop tax fraud in Bakersfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nance. Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Josh Taylor. I'm a representative for the carpenters you see behind me. And tonight we're talking about tax fraud, and we're all concerned about that and the exploited construction workers in our community. Nationally, tax fraud and human trafficking costs our communities $8.4 billion in taxes a year, all while contractors and developers add to their bottom line. Now, don't get me wrong, it is important that developers and contractors make a profit, but it needs to be done legally and without exploiting workers. Lost tax revenues cheat our community out of much-needed funding for fire departments, schools, health services, road repairs. What about all these city workers outside that are screaming for good wages, for a raise that they haven't seen in years? How about these folks over here with the Greenfield Walking Group that are in dire need of safety implementation in their area that the city could support if we had all the funding necessary through the development of construction projects in the area if contractors and developers are doing what they should be doing? Contractors use cash pay and illegal labor traffickers to commit fraud while taking advantage of vulnerable employees, some of the most vulnerable folks in our community. Workers are sent a clear message. The American dream is not for you, while the predators that exploit them enjoy record profits. So what can the city leaders do? The good stewards of the tax dollars, as we heard the mayor mention earlier tonight, what can we do to stop tax fraud and the criminal exploitation of workers? What can the city do to protect law-abiding contractors that are competing with the criminal enterprise? Well, it starts with awareness of the problem, followed by accountability of the perpetrators, and finally, enforcement of the law. We ask that you stand with us and demand accountability from criminal developers and contractors that use tax fraud to exploit workers and leave our community to pick up the pieces. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Andy Ceballo.
And Carpenters, I just want to thank you for your volunteerism in the community. I see you out so many Saturdays volunteering, so thank you so much.
Good evening, Bakersfield City Council. My name is Andy Ceballos, and I'm here on behalf of a project I need to do for my class at CSUB. And the issue I'm going to talk about is a certain road I pass by every day to go from my house to school. And that road is Stockdale, and I pass by there 5 times a day, 5 times a week. And I always pass by, and I feel like I'm on a roller coaster, but going to school, I shouldn't be feeling like I'm on a roller coaster. I should be feeling like I'm on a smooth road. And specifically, it's like from CSUB to Chick-fil-A. And I feel like the road there should maybe be better, especially since it's like on a good part of Bakersfield. But I did want to say a good job on fixing the road on East California. I believe you guys redid like part of the street, and it's like really smooth now, and I really like that. And I would hope you guys could maybe do more of that, but I know it's like really pricey, so it might take some time, but the streets are looking better now, so thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
William Bailey.
Sure. Councilmember Smith, before Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, Mr. Stragaloose, is that on the list for this year? Seems like it was.
It is, Councilman Smith.
So that will get repaved maybe this summer. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Bailey.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, City Council. I've spoke before, so here I am again. We were here protesting, and then I was informed that no one's speaking, which didn't make a lot of sense, so I came in, signed my name up. Yeah, we are protesting for the cost of living raise, and you know, basically, I've been with the city, as I've said, 18 years in the streets department, and kind of the unsaid, somewhat said idea, mode of thought is striking, which I've never done that. I've never been faced with that since I've worked for the city, and I don't want to. You know, I worked for the city so long, I've been in the streets department so long that this is pretty much is my life. It's become my life, and I don't want to. These streets matter to me. Public safety, it matters to me. I mean, I'm just a dude, you know, but it does matter to me. And I don't want things to fall apart. It seems like everything these days is falling apart. Everything's falling apart. Families, cities, the economy, you name it, everything's falling apart. Well, this is our city. Let's keep our city together. I don't want it to fall apart. You know, I hope, I would like to incite, encourage, beseech, whatever 2-3 letter word I'm not thinking of, you know what I mean? You guys to just do a little better on the cost of living. I just want this to fly. I want my job. I want things to work. I want our city to work. And, you know, I'll be honest, we've lost another employee. Another guy went to oil fields, you know, and the kid that I work with, this kid works two jobs. I mean, he's young. He's got a lot of energy. I'm not really young anymore. Well, so, I mean, but he gets off work there, and then he goes and he works at a funeral home and gets bodies and gets, I mean, I know, I realize my time is running out. My time's getting short. But, you know, I'm just saying, and he's barely making it. And he just bought a house, and
Mr.
God
Bailey,
bless him, that's good. But
Mr.
that's in
Bailey,
the
your
hood.
time's up. Could you bring your comments to a close, please?
I'd just like to encourage you, please, a little better on cost of living raise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
consent calendar items 7A through 7AG for approval.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Does any council member wish to recuse themselves from any item? Seeing none, any council member wish to pull an item? I have Councilmember Weir requesting items 7N, 7Q, 7R, and 7X be pulled for separate consideration tonight. And with that, I'll make the motion to approve the remaining consent calendar items.
Thank you. You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. And now, 7N. Councilmember Weir.
There we go. Thank you very much. I just have a question on this particular item because all my years here, I don't think I've seen this on the agenda before. So is it just on the agenda because of the amount of money?
Correct, former Vice Mayor and Councilmember Weir, yes, that is because it's within the council authorities of the spending limit.
Okay. All right. I move approval of that.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. And now 7Q. Councilmember Weir.
Thank you. This is a tentative track map on 7325. And they're going in, and my understanding is they're not going to complete all their improvements. So when they do that, are they posting a bond for us to make sure that we are secured?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay, and that's just normal practice?
It is.
Okay. All right, thank you. I move approval.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. And now 7R. Councilmember Weir.
Thank you, Mayor. This kind of caught my eye, and I'm, we're planning here, we're trying to chart out things and do the right thing. I understand all that. And it's fine that we're going to look at roads in a different, maybe kind of light and stuff. But while we're planning for those roads, our own roads are just in bad shape. I mean, they're in really bad shape. And so I'm hoping that we can do something to quicken our response to the road. So, for instance, at the corner of Haley and Columbus, that thing is like an egg carton out there. It's terrible. And I know that's going to be repaved soon. But you could go down Columbus, you could go to Mount Vernon, you could go, in my ward, it's bad. So I'm hoping staff can maybe take a look at what's going on over there in Ward 3 in that area, and maybe we could sit down and talk about that at some point in time, because it's not getting done. And I'm not blaming anybody, but it needs to be done. And I think that needs to be done before really we start thinking about what we can do, because building new roads in new conditions doesn't mean they're going to get repaired. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it. And with that, I'll move approval.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
One more thing about that item. It is, do you know how much PSVS dollars are going into that, into the planning?
I believe there's a combination of funds being used for this
Yeah,
particular
there are a
project.
number of.
I don't know off the top of my head how much, if any, PSVS funding
Well,
is being used for
it
this.
says that in there. So if you don't know, that's fine. Maybe you could just email that to me.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm assuming, but I just want to confirm that the planning process will include the multimodal transportation ad hoc committee.
Yes, Vice Mayor, absolutely will. As a matter of fact, at yesterday's meeting, we had made mention of the active transportation plan being presented tonight.
Perfect. Thank you.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. And now 7X, Councilmember Weir.
Just a quick question on this. We advanced them, let me pull it up here. We advanced them originally, it seems like to me it was about $280,000. I can't find it. It seemed like it was around $280,000. And now we're hiring one additional person and the advance has grown to $500,000. Maybe you could speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. It's a good question, and it is a much higher amount. It's because the program has expanded significantly. And so last year, we did just a summer internship program, but this coming year, it will include a college fellowship program, an expanded summer intern with more interns being able to go to more of our nonprofits, as well as we've actually stood up a recreation, Parks and Recreation is going to have a team of summer interns. Are going to help with recreation activities, out in our parks. And so, if you look at the per participant cost, it's fairly comparable. It's just a much bigger scope of placements into those different internships.
I thought it says we're only increasing one youth.
That's for the specific position, but and I don't have the number in front of me, but we're increasing the number of total interns placed in the city and our nonprofits by probably, close to, I'm not sure, it's probably close to 100 individuals. This is just one additional position for the community foundation to help manage it, is the one that's referenced in the admin report.
Okay, because it's expanding, that's why it needs $500,000?
Correct.
Are we doing this on our own?
When you mean on our own?
Is this a city program?
Thank you, Councilmember. It's facilitated by the city, but these are state dollars that have been made available to the city. They're actually ultimately federal ARPA dollars passed through to the state. We've chosen to take advantage of that. These funds can't be used for some other program. And so, and actually, part of the reason that we've expanded the program is that there are more funds than can be spent in the time frame that we're given. And so we've escalated our efforts to get more placements in the next couple of years. But it is all state federal money.
All right, thank you. I move approval.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes. Oh, Councilmember Freeman, would you like to comment before?
Somewhat adding to that, these are ARPA dollars, correct? And we've been discussing how ARPA dollars end in a year or two. I just want to be sure this is, glad to do it with ARPA dollars, that we all understand this is not something that we can be obligated to continue with at $500,000 a year once the ARPA dollars go away.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. We have been clear that this is ARPA funded. There is some good news that the state has made a commitment to make this an ongoing budget allocation from the state beyond when the ARPA dollars are completed. But we've been clear with the community foundation and our partners at the schools that if the state money goes away, we can't sustain this program.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. And now, next item, please.
Reports item 10A, fiscal year 2023-24 Public Safety and Vital Services Measure Proposed Budget Preview. A blue memo or staff memorandum has been provided for this item, correcting a Scrivener's error.
Thank you. Mr. Clegg.
You, Mayor and Council, as the slide deck's coming up, just some introductory comments. We're not taking action tonight. This is very early in the process. This is the budget that Council will be adopting in June. We'll have multiple workshops between now and then, but this is an early look of the Council at what are the available funding and some proposed projects, but the intent is to get some Council feedback. Now, as we'll walk through here in a moment, the recommendations are based on Council priorities that have been set and Council goal conversations, but it's always a good opportunity to get feedback early in the process. Just a reminder again of our 5 Council goal focus areas as discussed recently in a workshop. Actually, I believe this is not the right presentation. Oh, no, it is. I'm sorry. This slide is in 2 different presentations. As a reminder, these are the 13 priorities established by resolution as the categories for Measure N PSVS funding. As an overview, we have made many critical staffing implementations in prior years. You'll see much smaller staff recommendations in the current year and even still pretty small amounts in sort of new even contract programming because we've made significant increases in recent years. Whereas we're continuing to see more one-time projects being proposed. We are seeing a slight decrease in revenue and projections from last year to this year, and that has been taken into account. Our focus areas are public safety and homelessness, our streets, which is actually a first for PSVS, still some park recommendations, and then some small items, but intended to increase our efficiency and effectiveness. And of course, we're being very thoughtful about the potential economic downturn and setting aside contingencies. This is just a reflection again of those revenues historically, still at $100 million projected tax with the slowdown in the economy. It's interesting, we're not seeing major signs, but everyone is projecting, and so we're trying to be responsive to that. But so far, we continue to see things pretty much quarter over quarter about on track with prior quarters. Our recommendations are always based on feedback we've received from City Council, as well as from some of the input from our public stakeholders, Citizens Oversight Committee. Again, very few staff considerations, but there's some in there, and a focus on our major initiatives that make a big impact. Even though we're at $100 million tax, and beyond what was allocated at mid-year, there are $20 million in PSVS fund balance carrying forward from last year, so we're working with a $120 million proposed budget, but needs to be focused on one time because those 20 million are considered one time, and there are $36 million in total proposals. I'll provide some high-level overview in a couple categories, and then we'll look at a few lists with some more details. But you'll see the ongoing recommendations are fairly limited, and they're in staffing for police department and code enforcement, and excuse me, as well as park rangers. It's a little bit small on the screen. I apologize for that, but we have a complement of police that includes some command staff. There are 4 command staff recommended, and then a fair number of civilian positions. But the intent on the civilian positions is similar to prior years, where we've identified some duties that are being carried out by sworn officers that could be probably better done by another position at a civilian level, and free up those sworn officers for more operational police work, either administratively or in the field. Some of the additions for the command staff is related to our requirements to comply with the expectations of the Department of Justice stipulated agreement. If we did not free up some of the command staff through these civilian positions, we'd probably have to add additional sworn officers. But because we're looking at some areas like technology services and some of our capital projects, we have police command staff managing those areas, and we're proposing to actually professionalize or civilianize those positions to have ongoing professionals in those roles year over year. We know in our command staff, by necessity, they rotate in and out of their assignments fairly often, and we don't always have continuity on some of those administrative functions. This would provide that continuity and, again, free up those individuals to be doing police work as opposed to some of the administrative work. We are including there 2 police annuitants, small dollar amount, but it's very effective use, the annuitants, because it's a cost effective. These are retirees that come back and work at an hourly rate in some functions that can be done by former law enforcement sworn personnel. And then there are some limited vehicle needs for some of the new staff there. The last items, we have a park ranger manager, park ranger supervisor. There's 2 factors at play here, because the park ranger program is young, and we did contemplate, is now the timing to make an adjustment there. Over this past year, we have found 2 things. One, we have what are called parks rapid response teams. They're not the code rapid response teams that go and address encampments, but these are teams that go and rapidly address the repairs and maintenance needed in our parks. Those teams had been attached to the capital division of parks, but we've reassigned those to actually work in tandem with the park ranger teams so that they're well aligned and that they're responding in a coordinated effort to leverage the skill sets of both of those teams. With those 2 teams also being part of the Park Ranger Corps, we have a span of control challenge that we don't have a manager to manage now, a team of about 30 individuals. And so that's a proposed position there. The supervisor, as we have our 2 different shifts, we've only had really 1 lead role in the Park Ranger program, and we have 2 different shifts, and so we'd like to have a supervisor on each shift. But because of budget considerations, I asked the team to forego other positions to create vacancy savings. So that's why the park ranger supervisor ongoing amount is very low at $20,000 to achieve some savings by not filling 2 other positions within the department. The last bucket there, as we continue to try and address our chronic nuisance properties, we hired 3 individuals last year. That team has been stretched thin to tackle the many initiatives around special projects, and this provides a supervisor for that team. And then also having a code officer and an assistant code officer to help with our vacant properties and vacant property registry as referred by council. This creates some capacity to do that. So in the first year of the Public Safety Vital Services tax measure, just to put things into context, there was more than 100 positions hired. In year 2, it was in the 90s. Year 3, we were, I think, in the 60s. And at this point, we're down to where we just see some very critical adds because we want to stay within that ongoing target that is established by council with a heavy focus on public safety. As we've defined ongoing to be more personnel related and those core functions, we also are now being clear about what we would consider an operating cost, but a recurring operating cost, not a permanent ongoing cost. And so this is a category with several a contract for service type considerations as an operating cost, not a CIP, but again, as a contract cost, something that we could change or pivot in future years much more readily than, say, personnel costs. As it relates to economic development, we know that there are staffing challenges and just capacity inflow challenges with our permit review process, and this is to provide additional funds to help us address needs in our plan review, permit review process, speed up our outcomes there. In the second category, as we look at homelessness, we don't have too many proposals this year because we made significant homelessness investments in prior years. As we have identified gaps in the different services available to individuals experiencing or about to experience homelessness, we've filled those gaps. We built shelter beds. We've used other funding to address sober living beds. There's still a gap in individuals who are becoming homeless, who we could do some prevention services with through eviction prevention services or rapid rehousing services. So there's a contract proposal here that we would do this not in-house, but we would contract that out to an entity. The next item is that as we are looking at private security, we've made significant investments there. Anticipating that there may be some additional needs, we want to just set aside a smaller amount by comparison to the previous amounts we've allocated in the event that we identify where there's some additional hotspot areas or we need to stretch our services farther than they are there today. That dollar amount is in there for that. The next three items are related to public safety and policing, where we've had our gun violence intervention programs have been very successful. They have some, and we are careful about some of the strategies around this, but they have some operational costs for some rentals and other services that help them, their special enforcement teams focus on individuals at highest risk of gun violence. And those have been absorbed in prior years, but it causes budget strain, and so this is some additional dollars to help support that CALVIT program. The case services is a technology tool that helps with efficiency in policing. And then we've had in-house canine training. We think that we can free up a police officer and be a little more effective with our dollars by contracting out that canine training. As it relates to quality of life, as we continue to address, again, our chronic nuisance properties, there's some of that we think that can be contracted out. So the receivership services and citation services or notifications for citations, that's an efficiency and savings by being able to contract some of that out and save some of our staff time and move faster in that area. And then that last item, in the far right column for a community event fund, this has come up some recent committee meetings, and there's been a council referral on this. We have supported community events in an inconsistent manner, and these are special events where you have to get a special event permit. We do have a nonprofit policy, which we've established, a limit on those nonprofits that receive annual funding assistance. This is more about special events, not about community groups, where when we collect a special event permit, there's unfortunately been some inconsistency with how we've required those event producers to provide for traffic control or police costs, and we're wanting to level that playing field and create a consistent policy, but we assume that's actually going to have impacts on some of our events. Some of our parades and other events may be asked to contribute to the costs of their events in a way different than they've been asked historically. And I do think we as a city should promote and support some of these community events that create a nice asset for our community. But if we do it in a consistent way that's been thought out through a process, having some funds set aside to make good decisions based on a council policy that is developed would help to offset some of those costs to community events that, again, may be asked to make contributions they have not been required to in the past for their police costs or public works costs. Well, then the last item on the left column for that category is an allocation similar to the one we did last year to provide funding for violence prevention services and programming services, targeting young people that are at risk of violence that have been identified through our CalVIP program. And then finally, on the recurring operating, the innovative and efficient government, what I would characterize this listing as is this is an efficient way to contract for services instead of trying to hire additional city staff to help us perform in these areas. The model of excellence is the same thing we've been doing on our performance audits. This is the Moss Adams risk assessment that we conducted. We've done 4 to 6 projects this year with funding for performance audits. This will continue to do our performance auditing program. The second line item, we had $50,000 in last year's budget for community engagement and helped us build some tools for community engagement. But as we are going into many important initiatives as a city, we feel there's still a need to do ongoing engagement and continue to build out our toolkit, as well as be able to support some of the events and the community meetings that we want. And this funding bucket would allow for that. On the customer service side, we've had $50,000 a year for the last several years. This is the same number. It's just to help us do trainings for our employees to improve our customer service. The far right column in this last category, we have used grant writing services. We did $150,000 at a mid-year last year. We've used those funds to good effect this year. Because we have our lobbyist on board who provides some grant writing services, we think we can reduce that amount to $75,000, but want to keep that in the budget to help us get more grant writing services and get a big return on investment for the grants that we can receive for that. The next item, we have had a state lobbyist. It's worked well for us. This year, as we tried to pursue the direct funding allocations or earmarks and other grants, we have felt that we've been not quite as successful as on the state side without that federal lobbyist, and that we think it's time to identify someone to help us on the federal side more with grants than with advocacy. We feel like we have pretty good ability to advocate to our delegation, but we need help with our grant writing on the federal side. The next one is we're currently doing a parking feasibility study to look at whether we should form a parking enterprise and have a separate enterprise fund to manage our parking financials and operations, anticipating that the results of that, we want to have some money set aside in the event that we choose to contract that parking enterprise out to a third party for managing of our parking enterprise. If we choose to go a different path, then those funds would be available to come back into the general fund. And then this last category, I'll admit, is a little bit fluid, but as I looked at some of the council priority initiatives that we have not fully analyzed or fully put into motion, I expect some of those council priorities are going to require some consultant fees for some further analysis, for some studies, potentially some other contract dollars. And so this is a set aside to help us pursue some of those council priorities that don't have a direct line item prepared for them at this point. Switching gears into our one-time, these are bigger buckets, big dollars, but actually about the same size of lists, which is reflective of, again, the size of projects that we're thinking about here. For our, and again, I apologize for the size there on the screen, but the big ticket item under public safety and resilience is, again, $5 million for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's the significant piece there. On the police side, we do have a vehicle operations center. This is where police officers learn how to drive their patrol vehicles. There is no building on that site, no restrooms, and so while they're there on site, they just hang out under a canopy and do their best. This would put a very small building out there to have some facilities while they're on site. And this is only half the cost because we're going to be able to get reimbursed for the other half of the costs from the state for it's a post-certified training location. The next item is that we have a lot of police records that are hard copy records, taking up a lot of space, and this would allow us to convert those to digital. It's a one-time, get it done, and have those saved as a digital record and not have all those paper records on file. The next item, we have our fire department has a records system that is very dated. It is no longer compatible with the system that the county fire uses. This would be a one-time cost to transition their system to a newer system consistent with the county fire system. We actually have annual operating costs to cover the ongoing subscription to that new software, but this is a one-time integration or transition cost. Next item, we've been doing security cameras in our parks, but we knew we couldn't do it all in one chunk, so we've been phasing it out. We did $200,000 last year. This would be another $200,000 to continue to place more security cameras in our parks. Last year, we also allocated funding to create a space for our rapid response team that's working on the river area. They have specialized vehicles to go out into the river area. But we don't have a place to actually house those. We're keeping them in a temporary spot, and so as we've estimated the costs for that project, we're about $100,000 under budget, and this would allow us to complete that project and put a facility up for those vehicles close to the river so they can be very responsive in their patrols out there. And then lastly, the needs at the animal shelter are actually fairly extensive. There's several $1 million of improvements needed out there. But as we looked at balancing the many competing interests, this is a phased approach to allocate resources to the animal shelter to continue to make improvements. I expect we're going to need to make allocations there for several years to come to get that to a much more efficient and adequate facility. Switching gears into reliable infrastructure, this is where we actually have not spent a lot of PSVS historically in streets, but as it's a raising priority, we've got almost $11 million in streets monies to go towards projects through the PSVS capital projects. We have that first item's a smaller item, but it's in support of our code enforcement teams. But then the remaining items throughout are really about streets. We have some specific complete street projects, but then we have some significant set-asides for our traffic calming, for our multimodal demonstration projects, for regular street resurfacing, for alleys and for pavement markings. The grant match fund is a fund that we've used this year to help us be fast and competitive in matching against grants. We want to keep that in place, and if those funds don't get used, they can be deployed to other projects or future year savings. Street lights, we've continued through multiple phases. We want to continue funding the street lights to work through all the areas that need those. And then lastly, we do have some specific projects in downtown resurfacing that we've done design work on, and this would provide funding to help us do construction for those. Moving to quality of life, and on the parks side of things, the park amenities and renovation improvements, that's something that we increased at mid-year. These are the funds that those rapid response teams and the park rangers use to go in and make repairs, small fixes to medium-sized fixes, and even if we have some projects where we need a new bench or maybe a new canopy over an area, this allows us to do some of those small projects that have never really been budgeted in our capital program prior. The neighborhood monument renovation is a pilot project that we're proposing. We know there's a lot of streetscape work that we need to do throughout town, but those entryways to some of our neighborhoods are the most visible. And this proposal is to go in and renovate a number of those with this funding. And if we see good success, that there's some of the most trafficked areas have a visual appeal, kind of as a gateway to those neighborhoods, then we may choose to continue to spruce those areas up as one way to stretch our dollars without having to necessarily make the same improvements to every streetscape or median throughout the city. And then we have a specific soccer park that we received a $1.4 million grant to build. There's a couple components that the grant doesn't cover, and so $100,000 would allow us to complete that park location to basically match those $1.4 million we've received. The next several parks that are listed there, those just represent the park facilities that have reached their useful life. The good news is we don't have the same level of park needs because we invested tens of millions of dollars over the last 3 years to make major improvements to all of our parks. I would admit that these, while there's need in each of these parks, these represent essentially sort of those projects that are at their useful life. They're not well beyond their useful life like some of the other ones that we've recently improved. One exception, and that's why it's in a different column than the others, is the Mesa Marin. That's a new park. We have been working on that project for many years, and because of some of the market conditions changing, the bids that came back were much higher than what was budgeted, and this is in an effort to get us to the point where we can move forward with construction. And then lastly, the gateway beautification projects. We've made a few improvements in some of our gateways, but we knew that it was going to be a phased approach as well, and this would allow us to continue to do some of these gateway beautifications on our entryways into the city. Then the final category, this is listed under efficient government because this is wise stewardship, but we're recommending setting aside additional contingency dollars just because we don't know what the economic conditions are going to be, as well as continuing to meet our reserve policy goals by contributing additional money into our reserves. The overall budget, even though PSVS budget is flat, the overall budget is slightly up. And so to continue to have our 2 months working cash, it would be about a $1.8 million contribution to our reserves, as well as that newly adopted reserve policy stipulates that the prepayment that we make to CalPERS, the savings that we get for that go into our pension trust fund, and so this activates that section of the policy and sets that money aside for that purpose. As I've come to a conclusion on the quick summary of what has, the starting point for a discussion on PSVS, I failed to cover the 3 different columns and categories. I apologize for that. I should have started with that. So, like we did in 2020 when we had an uncertain budget, we identified several projects that we called contingent projects that we would not move on until halfway through the fiscal year, until we could look at our revenue trends and make sure that the revenues were coming in on target. If they're coming in on target, we have a high confidence that we'll close the year in a good place. We move forward with those projects. But it creates a safety valve if revenues go down more than we expect. Those are projects that we choose to forego because it won't cut into existing programs and services. They're just one-time projects that we can say we're going to wait till another year to reprogram those, and that's a budget safety valve if the market downturn is more significant. That's the middle column for PSVS contingency. The third column we've labeled general fund contingency. In years past, I give kudos to Randy and the departments for always finding a way to make sure the budget is balanced. And I am absolutely 100% certain we'll balance the budget this year as well. But as noted in the admin report on this item, there are general fund costs exceeding general fund revenues anticipated for this coming year. We have some options. We can address those through ARPA funding, as has been previously mentioned to the council. We can address those with some PSVS funding. And we can also address those in some instances with maybe some choices to forego some things, but it would probably mean cuts in certain areas. That we've already scrubbed the general fund budget, and there's not much else to cut without having some kind of an impact there. But I think a combination of the three is a reasonable way of approaching the overall budget. But in anticipation of that, we just did identify certain projects that if we needed to pull from the PSVS resources to address essential services in the general fund, that third column is what we would recommend we forego. Essentially, we would forego those in order to address any general fund essential services we want to make sure continue to be funded. And so that sort of gives you a sense of prioritization within the PSVS budget. Those that are in the far left column, we would think those are very important. We need to move forward with those. In the middle column, they can be contingent if revenues stay on track. And then the third column, if we do need to shift funding to cover other areas, those are the projects that we as staff would recommend foregoing first. But that's where the council feedback also comes into play. If there's certain projects on those lists that could shift to one column or another, that would be good policy feedback from council. With that, I will entertain any questions or feedback from council.
Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Christian, and I'd like to compliment you and your staff on good presentations. You make it very easy, I think, for the council to understand all of these funds, where they're going, and I really appreciate it. It's we made a lot of progress there. Thank Randy and his staff and anybody else involved, because you guys have done, it really helps the council when you summarize it as nicely as you do, and we can do our jobs a lot easier. So I appreciate that. I only have a couple of comments. One is, I guess they're both overall comments. One is, I think it said 157 million of funds to spend we do it wrong, PVSV, whatever it is. It's got 157 million that we're spending in these budgets. I believe that's what the first page started off saying. Got 100 and, what was it, 120 plus 57 or 36?
Sorry.
120.8 plus 36. So I have that right?
If I could, Councilmember, the 36 is part of the 121. So it's really only 121 total. 121 total.
120. Okay, so this is 121 million worth of projects.
Actually, what you're seeing is $36 million worth of projects. The 121.
Well, that's what I thought. This is.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of it?
The rest is in a couple different buckets, and so there's a couple other slides actually, but I wanted to pause for discussion. So we have about $54 million in ongoing personnel and other ongoing costs, and then we have another. I guess it's I'm going a little bit off the cuff here, but about $20 million in what we are calling recurring operating costs, meaning we make annual allocations to the economic opportunity area funds.
Okay.
So
okay.
those are pre-approved items that we've been doing each year that are part of sort of our operating budget. So what's available for new proposed projects is about 36 million. The other amounts are, some of it's ongoing, but some of it are just the other contracts for services we've been doing, our homeless cleanup crews, those kind of things.
Well, harder to change, although if we're starting to look a full year and a half out, that other, this is 30 something and there's really 120, there another 80 or 90 million that could be altered. So
Correct.
My point is, and I don't see that other to know how much, and I didn't see the general fund budget, how much are we putting into road infrastructure? That's where they're getting at. And here, about 11 million, we're not putting a disproportionate amount in here. I would like to see, when we see the total budget, which I hope, our budget workshop, I don't know how far away that is, but that a lot of, that we have a major expenditure on roads. If even within 30 or 36 million here, I would have no trouble if you handed me the budget in finding 3 million to shift over into the roads right here. That I think would be just as acceptable to most of the people up here. We are, yeah, you'd trim a little here and there. We'd say, hey, some of the park renovation, hey, we'll do that next year instead of this year. The equipment's still pretty good. There, if you have to, there's lots of places in here you could find money. And I would just like to see us, I mean, we're not really approving anything tonight. Be sure we're pushing enough money into our roads, because that's what we hear. We're safety, homelessness, roads. That's what constituents talk to us the most about. And we all believe in quality of life, and we've been doing a great job on the parks. I mean, we have gone through and we're continuing to innovate, so nobody can say we're not addressing our parks. But, you know, roads are really expensive. And these are big arterial Stockdale Highway that's getting bumpy. I mean, this stuff is more than $1 million a lane mile now. It is really expensive. So I'd like to see us push more money into road improvements if we can. So,
If I may, council member, it probably is the area of biggest, I anticipated the biggest conversation. And a couple of pieces of information to consider in that. One, the number of other roads from other funding sources, because we have gas tax, we have utility surcharge. $33 million is going into other streets and roads projects beyond this 11 million. So I recall maybe last year or the year before thinking, what if we put an extra $500,000 towards roads? $500,000 against 30 million doesn't make a big impact, but 11 million on top of 33 million, that's a big impact. So that's good news, I think.
I would suggest that when you review this with the Oversight Committee, make sure you tell them the big picture so they really understand that that was a major item, even of the PSVS is infrastructure, 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 because we're so far behind. So I'm concerned about that, and I'd like to see you really be sure you address that. My only, because all of these are worthwhile expenditures. It gets subjective on, I mean, I couldn't find anything in there that didn't sound reasonable, okay? So in a sense, I kind of have to leave it up to you to allocate it, because every single thing sounds sensible. If you can afford them all, then okay, let's do them all. But second, and this could be during our budget sessions later, break out how much of the PSVS and ARPA funds, especially ARPA funds, are being used for capital improvements that are more one-time, and for things that really are more like services, you know, contribution to the Boys and Girls Clubs, things like that that are going to end, because I don't think any of us have any idea how big the scope might be, that, hey, we're going to have $20 million or 10 or is it 5? I have no idea, but is this going to be a big deal when we can't supplement things with ARPA funds anymore? I just think that'll happen in a couple of years, and we ought to start raising our own awareness so we can plan for it, and that can be done in our budget workshops. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to address this, the park at Riverwalk playground rehab, and like you said, it's not beyond, but it's time. And I had mentioned to Mr. Anthony, and I hope while we're doing this, we can, there are probably 10 tree wells close to where that playground is, and there are no trees. There's one little tiny grass shrub in the middle of what is obviously a tree well, because I guess, you know, we had trouble growing the trees in the beginning, or somebody vandalized them or whatever. But it's a pretty hot spot to stand and watch your toddler play and it's obviously designed to have shade there, and we should be able to figure out how to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Weir.
Thank you. And I appreciate Councilmember Freeman's comments on the roads, because that's kind of what I was leaning toward with my road comment. They're getting bad. You know, I really, really, really would like to see some significant improvement if we can get to that point this year. On page 3 of your synopsis here, I read a portion where we are projecting a deficit this year. Could you kind of tell me or tell us about what that looks like and where it's going and
Yeah.
how we're going to fill it?
Yes, and we will go in depth in our workshops, but it's a fair question if we're bringing it up to get a sense of what we're talking about. So, a couple quick thoughts about what's just driving the issue. We are seeing increases in our overall costs that are at or above inflation. So inflation this last year was 6 to 8%. We've seen those types of increases in most of our materials and supplies. We actually cut back in some areas on materials and supplies and trainings because it's discretionary. But our things like electricity is going up 30+% this coming year, and some facilities use a lot of electricity. Our insurance costs across all funds are going up, I think, $7 million alone this coming year because insurance rates are going through the roof. Our other internal service funds, just our ability to provide our technology and fleet, is increasing significantly with the cost of vehicles, cost of fuel. And then I think in fairness too, to be transparent, our employee personnel costs are increasing with some of our efforts to be more competitive in recruitment and retention. So and I said earlier, and we'll break this down. Our Bradley Burns, we're actually anticipating going to be a little bit up next year. That's good news. Our property tax actually continues to be up despite some of the market conditions that have gone up and down in the last couple of years. And so we are seeing an increase in revenues in the general fund, but the costs are far outpacing those increases. And we're looking at probably in the range of $6 to $8 million that we're going to need to identify how to close that gap.
Okay. Well, all those things are happening here to the city. It's happening to all our businesses. It's happening to our homes. It's happening, and a lot of those people and a lot of us, we don't have a way to plug that. We have to do without things. So and if we're going to use PSVS money for essential items now, I've said this before and I'll get some disagreement, but that was promised that would never happen. So even though it's general fund money and it can be used for this, that wasn't the promise that was made 5 years ago. And I went to plenty of occasions where I went and heard that multiple times. So PSVS is not an answer to it's there for our use, but it's not an answer to fill deficits. It shouldn't be used for that. It was really promised for police, homeless, and roads. But the two were the top, and now we're seeing that. I don't think our community sees what we're doing, and I think that's a big problem. and I don't think we're communicating that to them. I mean, I've been on that bandwagon the whole time, but they don't see it. They feel things, but they don't see it. And if we don't manage this a little bit different, the constituents here they're going to revolt. I mean, every person I talk to, they're angry, not at the city, but they're angry about what's happening here. And so I would appreciate it if we really didn't depend on PSVS to pull our general fund out of trouble. And I don't know that you can do that, but PSVS was never made to plug holes in the general fund.
I would offer a couple thoughts. One, I absolutely agree that we can do a better job of storytelling. We do need to do more reporting and helping to share with the community the successes that are out there, and also, what is driving some of our realities that may not always be within our control, but the successes that we are achieving. I do think that the PSVS funding source, created opportunities to do new things that we haven't been able to do before. I've gone back and tried to understand the history, because I wasn't here when it was adopted, and read through those documents to understand, the reasons that PSVS was put forward, and I think there was a clear focus on essential services. I think I've heard a lot of folks talk about not supplanting the general fund, and I think that there has been some dialogue about that. Where I think the difference is with where we're at in the proposed budget is we're not really using it to supplant or replace general fund costs so that we can do new things in the general fund. It's just simply continuing to provide the same level of service from the general fund, which is a majority of police and fire. Now, we have some other services. There are general services and our parks folks. But some of our cost increases just to police are part of what's driving the challenges in the general fund. I think I'll take from your comments good points that we should be looking really hard at our budgets. And are there ways that we can save? Are there ways that we can cut back in reasonable ways? I think where it might feel odd is if we're cutting back on general fund expenditures only to do sort of newer programs on the PSVS side of things. It may not, be the point there, but I think our efforts to control costs and manage costs in the general fund have to be top of mind as well. I've asked Randy to actually be prepared in our budget workshops to really provide some detail of what's driving our costs, because I think that will help, again, communicate and be transparent about what is going into the general fund and coming out of the general fund, and why we are where we're at today. But I think fair points about making sure we do as much as we can to manage the general fund closely.
And one more thing that I would just like to ask, maybe for you to think about. I don't know what else we can do with homeless. I really don't at this point. I think we're doing everything that maybe we can do, unless somebody's got a better idea. But maybe we need to rethink some of that, because all the money we put in the last 4 years, we had to put in $100 million into that. And even me walking down the street, I don't see it. So is there a way that we can concentrate on something like that?
Yes, I think so. You don't see as much, I think, in the budget, because to your point, we've done a lot of what the city can just control and fund on our own. We are continuing to be very active with our regional collaborative, and they're finishing up an action plan to identify very specific.
That's not done yet.
That's not quite done yet.
Gosh.
To continue to fill really like all of the spectrum of options we need to address, although the city shouldn't fund all of those. So we need some of our partners to fund some of those, and so we're pushing on them to fund those. But I would say, and I was going to mention this earlier in Councilmember Freeman's comments too, there's two areas where I think if we said, you know what, let's put some more money there and find ways to shift things around, I would say, you know what, those are the two things we really ought to, find money for. It is streets. We've found a lot of money for that, but I'm open to council feedback about what else we might forego to put more money in streets. And thankfully, streets can actually move faster. That's a good news. The streets crews have been very efficient. Some of our other capital projects that we have to kind of design and bid out, they don't move quite as fast as streets, so we can spend the streets money. But back to your point, on homelessness, if there was a regional collaboration to create a diversion or a detention center, and we identified that there was a funding gap there, that is one area where I would say, let's find a way to make that happen, because I think that's absent the other affordable housing and homeless services. That is the one thing that I think on the street would have the biggest impact for our community visibly while we address the long-term issues.
Okay.
Councilmember Weir,
Yes.
the challenge of homelessness we know is a statewide issue. I was on with a conference call today with the big city mayors, and we're all experiencing the same thing where we've housed a lot of people with the state money, but those who are remaining on the streets have severe mental health and substance use challenges.
I totally
So what we're
understand
doing at this point is we're around with Secretary Ghali, and there is mental health reform right now, and that is essential, because without that, we're going to continue. We can keep spending money. What we've all voiced is that the inflow is greater. We've been able to house a lot of people. However, the inflow, I think, Anthony, is the statistic right? For every 6 that we get into emergency housing or some kind of housing, there are 10 additional that are added on the streets. So a number of mayors were expressing today that the inflow issue is the big challenge that at the state level we've got to solve. And so a lot of that funding now with mental health reform is going to be funding that's going into the county specifically to address these areas. And so it's going to be very, very targeted, because all of us are experiencing what you're articulating. We've spent so much money, but yet we don't see the results, and it looks like things are worse. But hopefully with this additional approach addressing mental health and substance use, we'll be able to make additional progress.
At the same time, I think we still need those centers because, they need someplace to go and be treated. All right.
And that's part of what it is, also centers for treatment and beds for those who are so severely ill that they can't do anything. Plus, we're pushing through conservatorship. So all of those issues combined with all the work that the council is doing, hopefully we'll be able to see additional progress.
I hope so. Thank you.
Anything else? Councilmember, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to get in a huge conversation about homelessness tonight, but I just would encourage us all to imagine if it wasn't for PSVS, where would we be, really? Where would we be without the Brundage Lane Navigation Center, who has housed over 250 individuals into permanent housing, and currently shelters over 300 people. These are people who would be on our streets tonight, and the problem would be much, much worse had we not adopted the Public Safety and Vital Services Initiative. It's our job as leaders to continue to look towards solutions and look towards ways in which we can reduce the population. And we understand the frustration. I'm frustrated myself, but we can't suggest as though this is all for naught. There is significant progress that has been made in this city, and I'm proud of it. Mr. Clegg, regarding PSVS, there was an ordinance that was also accompanying the measure, right, that was adopted by the voters of Bakersfield. Can you explain to us what was part of that ordinance. If I don't know if you have it in front of you, but I just want to, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you referenced some guiding documents. I just want you to articulate, because just to preface, I was part of almost every single community meeting related to PSVS. I was the chair of the campaign. And at every meeting, we made it clear to community groups far and wide that if we had not passed, and if the voters had not passed PSVS, we would continue to see cut after cut after cut in our general fund. And that part of the rationale for us asking the voters to approve Measure N was so that we can stave off future cuts in the general fund. And it makes no logical sense that somehow we're going to continue spending in PSVS on the right hand and then making cuts over here on the left hand. And so can you help me out a little bit with some of the language in the ordinance?
Vice Mayor, I'll do my best. It's a 15-page document.
Can you
but
just read the first 13 pages, please? No. Actually, can you provide a copy of the ordinance to each council member so we can review that, along with every single oversight committee member? How about that?
We can do that, and I only know this and had it, in a folder stored because first I probably could have mentioned this as well. I would not lightly even create this general fund contingency bucket and raise this issue if we hadn't done a lot of thinking about this and also done some homework to really look at what was the measure about, at least on paper here. It does reference having a locally controlled funds to pay for essential city services, that the city could no longer continue to provide the same level of service because costs were beginning to exceed available resources, that it would prevent cuts to essential, necessary, and appropriate general city services, that there's been no ability to add service providers and other staff over the last several years to keep up with community growth and demand for services, resulting in lower qualities of service provided to the community. It talks about increase in area and population, as well as references to some of the challenges of the time, public safety, homelessness specifically. And then it does outline the 13 funding criteria that we had on the screen earlier. And then there are several references to maintaining the city's essential services.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate those copies to the whole council, the mayor, and the Public Safety and Vital Services Committee, Oversight Committee. I just want to compliment staff on this presentation tonight and the 3 columns, PSVS, the contingency, and the general fund contingency. I think it's smart, and it's wise for us to think about these different priorities and prioritize these different allocations. I would ask, though, if we could look at various different line items and perhaps split funding into different categories. So perhaps, for example, downtown revitalization, we could put some dollars into the PSVS bucket, but then the remainder into contingency. I think that might help us get further down the road on certain projects that we don't want to lose out on, given the situation. I also appreciate the fact that you continue to articulate the 3 different types of line items. The ongoing expenses, the reoccurring operating costs, and then the one-time projects. I think that's really important for folks to understand the difference, and then understand what that impact means in future years should we have to make tougher decisions when it comes to PSVS dollars. Those reoccurring costs, for example, we may have to make some tough choices there in future years. So I appreciate you continuing to lift that up and explaining that to both all of us and to the community. It was mentioned regarding roads. I have to say, I agree, roads is a number one priority, not a number one priority, but a top priority among my constituents. I will say, though, that our streets division has done a wonderful job in lots of Ward 2 repaving roads throughout the last couple of years, and I appreciate it. My constituents have seen a dramatic improvement, particularly in areas that have been for a long time overlooked. And so I really commend our streets division for all of their work, and I hope we can double down on those efforts. I will also note too, in a lot of these one-time expenditures, they are roads projects in themselves. Some of the complete streets projects, some of the traffic calming projects. It may not explicitly state that it is a road repavement project, but in fact it is. And so we might want to think about how we kind of package all of those projects as part of a roads improvement project in the future. So as we look at different funding sources and how we're repaving roads, also the various different complete street projects, which will inherently be road improvement projects as well. Then finally, parks. So one-time PSVS funding. We have a number of these park projects. These are neighborhood parks. In my mind, these are throughout the city. It's really important that we upgrade these parks sooner than later. I understand that they're under contingency. I wonder, the Mesa Marin Sports Complex Phase 3, that is a PSVS line item. I wonder if there was opportunity to maybe switch that, make it a contingency, given the fact that there's a high utilization of these neighborhood parks. That's not a question for tonight, maybe in a future meeting as we look into this. The other question is, I'm interested in utilization rates. The parks, if we have any metrics, I'm not sure we do, but definitely interested in seeing what the use is at the sports complex in Mesa Marin. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to a couple comments. The general fund, is mostly police and fire, and if inflation is going higher than what our income is going, then that general fund is going to have problems. And that was the idea with PSVS, was to keep up with public safety. And so if inflation continues to go higher than our income, then we would not be able to keep up with public safety. And as one of only 2 council members that publicly supported PSVS, I think I understood what it was for. I also would address the homeless thing. We've done a lot, but the housing part is something that is still coming forward, and I think that's part of the big solution. And so I don't think we've seen all of our solutions quite yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. I don't see any other requests. Vice Mayor, receive and file.
Motion to receive and file.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. Let's take a break and come back at 7:30. Mr. Clegg. Oh, sorry. Madam City Clerk, next item, please.
Reports item 10B, Innovative and Efficient Government.
Mr. Clegg.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'll try and move quickly through this presentation just out of respect of the hour and the time. But this is in response to a referral to have quarterly updates on our council goal for innovative and effective government, because we don't have a committee where those types of topics sit. And I actually appreciate, too, the opportunity to bring to light some of these programs, because honestly, they're not the most exciting programs for some, but they're really critical to a good operation and being efficient and effective. Again, just as a reminder, we have our 5 council focus areas, but the 5th there is that innovative and efficient government. which the qualifying language we've talked about that is that a professional, effective, and customer-oriented organizations that find solutions for our community, and also that we manage our finances very carefully. This graphic I just put up there to suggest that it's being strategic, it's being thoughtful, it's putting your effort and your money into those things that are going to have big return on that value and have big impacts. So we have several objectives in our 5-year strategic plan. Those include having well-managed finances, managing our recruitment and retention and succession planning well, having efficient best practices, a culture of innovation and continuous improvement, and elevating our presence in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. to do better by the city. I'm going to walk through each one of those objective areas and just provide a quick highlight of some of the key initiatives underneath those, and then hone in on some more specific areas more than others. Again, well-managed finances is about our reserves. It's about finding efficiencies. You got to do more with less anymore. And we also need to have better asset management tools. I'm going to hone in on our reserves for just a minute. Historically, we've actually done a good job by having a retiree medical trust that is close to fully funded at this point. It is a closed system, but we've funded it. But in record time, I would suggest that we have now met our Government Finance Officers Association recommended reserve balance. We have $51 million of reserves in the bank. And that was in a short, 4-year period, whereas before the city had very little reserves. We also have built long-range financial forecasting tools, both on our pension obligations as well as our revenues and expenditures. We've adopted what I would consider a best practice reserve policy. It's one of the more progressive reserve policies out there in the state today. And we're setting aside monies in our pension trust fund, and so we have $4 million there. And we're working on now trying to build up our facility reserve that stands right now at $5 million. Our goal is to get to $10 million. But again, this graph just gives a quick look that, in a very short time, we've significantly increased our reserves. Switching gears, we do have that recruitment retention goal objective. And I'm not going to hone in on any one of these in particular, but just as a highlight, we are working through our class and comp. Having a compensation philosophy, succession planning, have a positive labor management relationships, and modernizing our recruitment and evaluation tools. And future quarterly updates will hone in on class and comp as that information becomes available. Excuse me, I got skipped here. So for our efficient, effective, best practice model of excellence, really that means we're a very professional organization that pursues best practices and creates some promising practices and best practices of our own. Part of that is our ERP system needs upgrade. We'll hone in on that in a moment. We are looking at process improvement teams and efficiencies, the performance audit program, as well as technology, governance, and investment. Honing in on our enterprise resource planning software project. It's our core financial system, 20+ years old. Interesting, earlier tonight when Kim was up there, that probably was, the system was implemented in 1997. She was number 8 on the new ERP, and now we're finally getting a new ERP. So we have many manual processes. We do not have good data collection systems. This will improve employee productivity significantly. We'll have automated processes. It'll give us the ability to make better decisions with better data. We'll have more transparency with better reporting and better visual displays. It's actually, I'm going fast, but it is a monumental project. You really only do this every 10+ years in a city. We've foregone that for a long time, and so it's a big lift for us, but we're on track to go live this year with our new ERP system. And I'll just quickly note that little robot on the screen is our mascot that we're trying to use to inform and keep our employees aware of what to expect.
That's your replacement.
Yeah, exactly. Switching gears to another segment of this objective, our performance audit program. again, it doesn't compare against things like homelessness, but this is really good work that's happening internal to the organization. We completed a risk assessment. We've created a audit program by contract, and this year we're working on technology services, capital program, our procurement practices, grants management, and space needs assessment. These are all internal performance audits that are taking place this year, and actually they've been helping us with our charter review process as well. Switching gears, we also talk about fostering a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. We have done lean training with our employees, as well as a CARES training as a customer service training. What you see there on the screen, we've done process mapping, where we've broken down processes to find where we can remove steps, where there's waste, where we can speed things up, make things better, and also just learning those skill sets so that our teams can continue to do that on an ongoing basis. We have done our Empowerment Hub, is this coaching program for our senior management and senior managers throughout the city. And we are building on our data analytics and performance management capacity, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. And we're working on the digital transformation of our organization and the community. A little bit more on our data analytics and performance management. Again, we're doing lean training, which is continuous improvement. When people hear about Lean Six Sigma, that's a very specific, narrow program. Many of the principles there we're applying, we're just not trying to get all of our people Six Sigma certified, but take the best from that continuous improvement training. And SMART goals, those are your specific measurable goals, and learning how to measure our performance better. We're adopting key performance indicators for all of our departments, and there'll be also key performance indicators in support of each of our city council goals. This last year, we put out a 3-year report for the Public Safety Vital Services tax that included numerous metrics that we collected, and that we're going to be able to each year report on our progress towards those same metrics in support of the goals of the PSVS tax. Interestingly, moving forward, budget books are going to require to have key performance indicators, and so we're working hard to be compliant with that in this next budget book to include our evaluation methods. And then also we have actually a very interactive budget online. Our open budget tool is one of the better ones that you can find. As I mentioned, the metrics for the council goals, we've actually established a dashboard that with this update to our council goals priorities, we're making some changes to that, but then we'll have an online active dashboard that folks can go to and see how we're making progress towards our council goals. And then lastly, you see sort of a map there on the screen. That's just to demonstrate we've got several GIS tools that are pretty strong. We're deploying a new one called Velocity, which is going to be specific to our encampment resolution. And have real-time data management around that high priority issue. This is, again, just to give a sense, this is part of our, we've been working with a government innovation coach, and his program is called Sustainnovation. And this is just a sense of some of the key areas that we're working in around becoming a much more data-focused and measurement-focused organization. I've always said, what you measure is what gets done, and we're trying to measure things more to make sure we're doing the right things. And this is, again, just a little quick insight on one of our process maps and a customer service set of principles that we're sharing with all employees throughout the organization. A little bit more on performance management. This is, a very high-level look, but we know that we need to continue to measure and make adjustments. We've got a 6-step process that we're using to identify those key performance indicators for each department and each council goal. And then I skipped one there. And again, as I mentioned, some of this will show up in the budget book, some of this will show up in our strategic plan, and some of it will show up in the council goals dashboard. And then lastly, as it relates to our elevating our presence in Sacramento and DC. We want to work with our lobbyists, grant management, and visits both away and to Bakersfield. Just leaning in a little bit on the grant management, we're working closely with our lobbyists, our PPG, who have a dedicated grant writer for us. And we've also contracted with them for additional grant writing on specific grants. But taking a quick step back, of course, the first step was adopting a legislative program, first that we've ever had, that has a priority funding list. We did centralize our grant monitoring and reporting through the city manager's office. Anthony Valdez and Juan Heredia have been helping us to manage that process. We have an internal team that's working on this and monitoring grants and talking with one another to make sure that they're learning both what to watch for, how to fill complete grant applications, and in particular, plan ahead. We have created grant preparation schedules to get better at what we're doing. And then in this last 6 to 8 months of this current fiscal year, we've applied for $200 million in grant funding. Some of those we did hear back on, we weren't successful. Many of those were big asks that happened in the last 2 months, and we expect to hear back. Some of our asks have been audacious goals, but we don't mind. Some of our earmark requests to our delegation were pretty aggressive, but again, if you don't ask, you don't get anything. But we have seen success, and those that are up there on the screen, we've received millions of dollars of successful grant awards. And in some areas where we have not been as successful historically, our HSIP and our urban greening, we've recently heard back on that were pretty competitive applications that we haven't necessarily gotten in the past. I would reflect the HAP funding does feel in some ways like a direct allocation, but the big city mayors had to fight hard to make sure that that direct allocation was in the budget and that it remained over multiple years in the budget. And so thanking Mayor Go and the team for helping to push hard to make sure those monies came through. And again, these are all dollars that if we were not being active about, we wouldn't be getting to help support those projects. So that was a quick overview of, again, some of those items we're doing to make sure we're becoming a smarter, faster, better organization. I'm happy to field any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. Really quickly, Christian, I just wanted to tip my hat off to you, and I should have spoke up while they were in the audience, but to Randy and to Mario, because I went through the table that we had created together as a council with your leadership on some of the council priorities and goals and objectives, and I was hard-pressed to find a single item that was either a medium or a high priority for this council that was not either in that budget or in this presentation that you just delivered. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Arias. Anyone else? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Clegg, for this presentation. Thank you for all the work. And finally, thank you for bringing this to the full council. I think it's important that we regularly review what's happening in this important council goal. So with that, I'll make a motion to receive and file.
You have a motion, please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Weir and Councilmember Gray absent.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Council and Mayor's statements.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple items. It's been about a year since we thought we were going to have a bike share, and we had a spin opening, and that lasted for about 4 weeks, and the bikes disappeared. And if we haven't canceled that contract, I don't know why. So I'd like an update on that. Where are we at?
Yes, sir. Councilman Smith, in terms of the Spin bike share program, Spin initially came out with their scooters, and then we entered into an agreement because we received a grant for a bike share program. The type of model that was deployed resulted in substantial vandalism and theft of those bikes to the sum of about $90,000. What we tried to do is change the model in working with Spin because there is an infrastructure component to the grant, and they cannot be broken apart. So if we were to break apart the bike share program from Spin, then we wouldn't be able to do the infrastructure component, and we want to continue to move forward with the bike infrastructure. So in talking to Spin, there are different models that we can use. One is a library type check-in, check-out for the bike share. And that's where we are. We're trying to evaluate that model. We want to start out with 30 bikes initially and see if we can get up to the 125 as what's required by the grant.
Okay, that's not what we proposed to Kerncog and CTC. It's not really a bike share.
Well, it's not an open field bike share program where bikes are left out and about. It is a different model approach, one that has worked in other communities according to Spin. And it is a way to potentially save the infrastructure component of the grant.
Okay, frustrating. Just one other comment. I only think about it when I come to a council meeting, but this hallway over here has been used for storage for seems like a couple of years now. And, you know, people from out of town, we show sister cities people around. It looks like a hoarder's house to me. I think that should be cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Kaur.
I want to take a moment to thank something that was happening in Ward 7, and I want to commend staff and especially our Rec and Parks Director, Rick Anthony, and his staff, as well as the park rangers, which were an incredible product of PSVS. And for some time, there were folks who were really vandalizing Stone Creek Park, who were honestly assaulting some of the elderly at the park. And I brought this issue up thanks to the constituents who regularly attend the park. And they had shared their concerns and even the fact that elderly had stopped attending the park altogether in fear of being assaulted on their way to the restroom or just gathering there or walking to and from the park. But as a result, one of the products and one of the solutions that came out of this was this really beautiful kind of merging of two elements of community safety, which I think is one, the residents and those who attend our public spaces, who are taking care of our public spaces, as well as an entity like our park rangers who are building in that safety as well and are building relationships with residents. So I wanted to commend them and and thank them, for those who tune in and watch at home, or those who are here, to know that it is an effective program, and I've seen the benefit of it in the past few weeks. And so have the residents who are now coming back to the park and feel safe at the park again. And these are very elderly individuals who only get to attend the park in the evenings. That's really their only outlet. And now they know what a park ranger is, and they rely on the safety that a park ranger provides. So I wanted to commend the team and really thank Rick Anthony. And in closing, I also want to kind of remark on how special this past week was. It was Easter, it was Passover, it was Ramadan, as well as Vaisakhi, and that only happens a few times within kind of our century. And for those who are celebrating, who have celebrated, who continue to honor it, just want to say that I'm thinking about you, I'm celebrating with you, and I wish everyone a happy Easter as it's passed, Passover, Ramadan, Vaisakhi, and other faith traditions, days, special days that fall within this time. And I think it's very special that so many celebrations are happening in different faith traditions at the same time within our calendar year. I think that's something really special to remark on. So thank you, city staff, thank you, colleagues, and hope everyone has a good weekend.
Thank you, Councilmember Carr. I don't see any other requests to speak, and so with that, we're adjourned at 7:51.